Welcome and happy Saturday to our 94.7 FM family. Welcome to another edition of Dr. to Doctor in the chat room. I am one half of your Dr. Duo, and the other half is in the virtual building. Dr. Nicole, how are you?
I am good. How are you doing, Dr. Shawn?
I'm doing well. So you've been on vacation this week. How's that been?
Oh, it's been really, really great. It's we are in Hot Springs, and I've
Okay.
never been there before, but good times, good times.
Awesome. So, guys, we are so happy to have you back with us another Saturday to discuss relevant topics that impact our communities and our world. We do hope that you're safe. We say that every week. It looks like the world is on the move again, and it feels really good, but we still want you to stay safe. If you think you've been exposed to the virus, there are still testing sites. If you don't know where to go to get tested, just simply contact your local health department and they can steer you in the right direction as to where you need to go to get tested. And please, I know that it cannot be mandated, but if you can, if there's no reason why you cannot get vaccinated, please, people, get vaccinated so that we can hurry up and get on the other side for real of this pandemic. All right. So, Dr. Nicole.
Yes, ma'am.
Every Saturday at 9 p.m. Central, the world gets a peek into the man cave. And while the world gets to peek into the man cave today, you and I are going to just open the door and walk right in.
Oh, all right. Let's do it.
Did you know that?
Just swing it right open.
Just gonna swing it right open and walk right in. Hello to the man cave guys. Hello. You see how we did that? Host of the man cave, the crooner. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Miss Rhonda Shaw. How are you doing?
I am doing well.
So glad
we are so happy to have you guys here with us today. Listen, we're gonna ask the host if he would tell us a little bit about the panel of the Man Cave show and tell us a little bit about the show as well.
Okay, we like to distribute the duty. So I will introduce the guys. I'll let Glenn tell you about the show. We'll do it like that if you don't mind. So I am the host. We're early in the second season. Had a great first season, built the viewership quite a bit. It is the Man Cave show, so it's strictly the voice of men typically talking, but just below me on my screen is one of the associate producers. His name is Roberson. He is a native of Chicago. He is an actor. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's an Amazon best-selling author. He's a dad of 2 great daughters. To his left, my right on the screen is Robert Hazzard, known as the Lover of Life. Who is a consultant in the Chicagoland area and an all-around good guy, positive energy guy. And above him is the one, the only Glenn Murray, who I've actually known the longest. And Glenn is the person who's launched things in Chicago like the Wine Crawl. He does a lot of work with authors in terms of getting them to the address they need to get to write books. That's one of his books he's discreetly promoting behind him, Faith, Failure, and Success. He's also an associate producer on the show, and he is associated with both G Rose Productions and 220 Communications. So that's, and I
just feel like I need to just like give a standing ovation. We have a really pitiful applause, so we just try not to even do it. Okay? So, but yay, hats off to all of you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Honored to have you. Tell us a little bit about the show.
Glenn.
So the show, and thank you for having us. We really appreciate this opportunity. We're on the radio now, so we're going to be on our best behavior, or at least try to.
Absolutely.
The show was started over a year ago. We wanted to pull together something during COVID that gave people something to talk about, something to look at, and working with Roger Jackson, who's our executive producer, and Keisha Rose is my partner in G Rose Productions. She's an executive producer on the show as well. We got our heads together and we said, okay, we think this would be a really great opportunity to just have men talk and give people a peek into men talking. So we did a test run on another show that we produced called Making Love Better Together. And it was myself and Mel and two other gentlemen. And so when we were thinking about who we could add to the show and what the dynamic would be, we thought Shawn would be a great addition as a host. So we brought him in. Robert was like a frequent guest for like a year. Robert was like our pinch hitter. Literally, we had a guest like drop out, and 2 minutes before the show, we called Rob and he jumped on. So we made him a permanent member, I think February, a very memorable Valentine's Day episode. If you watch that, you'll see Robert's grand entrance to music and everything else. It's a pretty big deal for him. But the show really became a peek into men talking. It was just us having conversations that were real and relevant. So yes, we joke around, as you can tell, we were joking before the show started. But we also have talked about some very serious things that are going on, about losing people to COVID, about the violence that we've seen across the country for the last year. Anything that's important topics. We cover relationships, which of course is the most popular because women love to hear men talk about relationships. Yeah. But we also really talk about current events, politics. Nothing is off the table in the cave, honestly. So that's really what the show is about.
Awesome. So before we move into our topic today, do we need to give you, I was going to say y'all, but actually other than you, Glenn, probably, I'm the only real Southerner on this panel today. And I was going to ask, did you need any Southern lingo? Because my co-host is terrible, and I hate when she says y'all. She just totally messes it up. Like it's not even.
Can I jump in here, Doc?
You can, Mel. Jump right in.
You have set Mel off, Rhonda. That is not good.
Hold on. No, I'm not ticked off. Two well-educated, beautiful women that are having us on the show. I'm far from ticked off. My daddy was born in Starkville, Mississippi, and I spent a lot of time down there. Okay? I know Southern.
Okay.
My grandmother on my mom's side was from Tuskegee, Alabama. My great grandmother was actually taught by Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver.
You are Southern.
Yes, and my grandfather's from New Orleans. So
my co-host is far from it.
Okay, all right.
To be Southern.
So I am more Southern than Glenn.
Look, I get some honorary Southerners then, since my family is all from a little town about 90 miles from Memphis called Milan, Tennessee. And I got family in Milan, Humboldt, Jackson, Gibson. So,
So the people that are listening, which people can listen all over the world, but the people that are in the vicinity of the radio station are gonna be, oh yeah, I probably know his folks.
Right.
I know. Hey, I'm Southern. I spent a year at Memphis State. So if you know what that means, before it ever became University of Memphis.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So listen, guys.
I don't know. Do I get to be Southern too?
You don't. When you started talking, you messed it up. See? When you open your mouth. No, sir.
That's it. In the boat with me, Robert.
Right. Come on, I'm in the boat. I'm ready to roll.
Very
Robert's life.
Huh?
Go ahead, Rhonda. I'm sorry.
Robert's life. He opens his mouth and messes it up.
They're having too much fun already, Rhonda. Go ahead. What were you saying?
So we've been very intentional about keeping mental health at the forefront lately. The month of May was dedicated to mental health awareness. And we've had some really great guests in May, but we kind of want to keep the focus there for a little bit before we move away from it. And if we have a little time today, we might want to dabble in some relationship stuff too, just because we got to open the door and walk into the man cave. But we want to be intentional today, right? We want to focus on men's mental health. And I don't know if Dr. Nicole wants to start this off, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about an article that I was reading recently that, and there was this quote, and the article was focusing on the barriers that men face as it relates to seeking help for their mental health. And there was a statement that read something like, there's a stereotype that men don't even like to ask for directions. So you can only imagine how hard it is for them to just say out loud, I think I need some help. So today, I think I want to start there. Why don't men generally ask for help? And maybe a second part to that would be, how do we destigmatize that? Anybody jump in?
I don't like to speak for all men. Because I'm a little bit different when it comes to that. I have no problem knowing where my weaknesses are, and anybody who looks to get better looks to fix their weaknesses. But if I had to give an answer, a blanket answer kind of to your question, it would be that society teaches us that asking for help is a sign of weakness. So that being considered, we are also taught that men are supposed to be strong and be tough and can't cry and don't have an emotional side and all of these things. So when it comes to asking for help, seeking help, if it is a sign of weakness, it is not manly. Asking for help has never been associated with anything manly. And if we want to be manly men, then we just don't do it.
And I'd add that that's the expectation, though. You know, we live with those expectations daily, that men are supposed to do this. They're supposed to, in our effort to be deserving of the affection of women, we're supposed to do this. We're supposed to do that. We're not supposed to cry. We're not supposed to. And so those things don't stay compartmentalized. They start to grow legs and extend themselves into other areas of our lives. And before you know it, you got a guy sitting next to a lady in the car, and he doesn't want her to think she's dumb because he doesn't know what the hell they are, and he doesn't want to ask for directions.
Yeah.
But I do think that we are entering a time and space that men are learning to be freer about that, and learning that those boundaries aren't healthy, and that you have to be able to express yourself, because little boys who are taught to not communicate, not cry, become grown men who can't communicate and can't cry and show emotion. So I think that, the more educated of us are realizing how deficient some of those teachings were, and we're conscious about stepping out of it. I don't think I'm sharing more than they would want to share, but a couple of the guys have therapists that they see regularly. I'm seeking a therapist that I can be comfortable with. So I do think that the tide is changing.
Yeah, it certainly comes as Shawn and Mel have already indicated. It's something that we've been conditioned with growing up, at least for me. You know, when we go back to our childhood days, we're taught that when we're on the slides or something like that, and we scratch our legs because we've fallen, is that no, get up and do it. Don't cry. Those are some of the things. But those types of situations or those types of experiences, as we know today, are changing, and therapy is helping us to be able to peer inside and look at some of the things, the deficiencies that we may be having, to address those.
Do any of you have sons? I'm sorry, go ahead, Glenn.
No, I was just going to say I was fortunate to have a father that encouraged me to, seek out help when I needed it. There's, the sign of strength is real strength is understanding your weaknesses. And I think that's what people really have to realize, and men especially have to realize that.
If you asked if any of us had sons.
Yeah.
No, I've raised two girls. I lost my son in a pregnancy some years ago. So my son, he would have been 4 this year. So I don't, but I have 2 girls. But Robert.
Yeah, I have a son who's 35, and I also have 3 grandboys. So we are actually teaching them that it's okay, and reversing some of the stereotypes that I may have grown up with.
Yeah.
I've said on the show a couple of times, and it was never done with malice. It was done being true to the era. But I remember being a kid, and every night when it was time to go to bed, my brother and I were taught to hug my mother and give her a kiss goodnight. We were taught to shake my father's hand. And when I look back on that, it was harmless in the way it was rolled out, but it could have created some major deficiencies, psychologically. And I think, as an example, I think that I'm a much more affectionate man than my older brother is. Because you don't know how well you're going to be able to break free from those things once you become aware that they exist, right? And so my brother isn't like an affectionate guy when it comes to, he's not super affectionate anyway, but definitely not when it comes to men. He would have a problem being physically affectionate with another man, whereas I never had that hang up. All of my close buddies, we hug. I had a buddy, we used to playfully kiss each other on the cheek when we hugged, you know, love, 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 you know. So I think it's not just about what you were taught, but it's also about your ability to recognize it as something that's not bearing you good fruit, and then deciding that you're going to try to do something different.
So Shawn, I hear you talking about breaking those generational curses. And so one way that I think we can do that is to seek therapy and kind of do our own works. And you all mentioned that most of you do have a therapist or are actively seeking therapy. So
Rob has 6. I don't think there's any free therapists in Chicago now, because Rob has like 6 of them.
And he needs 2 more. And he needs 2 more.
And that's an expensive bill. I just got to tell you. Thank God for.
Rob, you will be on time next time.
I know I will. See what happens.
Nicole, none of it is working either. That's why he needs 2 more, because them 6, they're not getting the job done.
We have a fund started now. We actually are raising money to send him to a 7th therapist.
Wow. Okay. So then here's my question. How did you come to decide that you wanted to start therapy? And what was that process like for you? Did you just wake up one day and say, I'm just going to call someone? Did you struggle with it? I mean, walk us through what that looked like.
You know, honestly, I think I was having a conversation maybe with a lady I was dating at the time. And I realized that an area of pain and discontentment that I had compartmentalized in a way that worked for me. But that didn't mean that it was a healthy way to look at it, right? It was just a way that worked for me. Like I can say I'm done with relationships because there's too much foolery in it, and that justifies me staying outside of the game.
Yeah.
In actuality, I'm going to bed every night wishing I could meet that one, right? So I'm framing it in a way that makes my pain functional, and somebody else called my attention to it, and I was like, man, I think I need to be honest about the fact that I need an objective voice in my ear that can tell me, hey, you're not looking at this right. The only thing is I'm kind of picky about that voice, so I'm always looking, listening. There was somebody on our show recently who pitched being my therapist, and then in one of our threads I saw that she was one of those whataboutism people, and I was like, I can't do that with you. You know, if you can't isolate an issue, you know, and hash it back without trying to counter it with the parallel, I'm not giving you my emotional nakedness. I'm not doing that. But I am looking, and I am open, and I'm looking forward to when I find that person.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think we need to actually take a break, but I'm interested to hear more from the guys about how you came to, decide to get into therapy. But we'll take a quick break and more with the men of the men cave.
We will be right back on 94.7 FM. Stay with us. We are back on 94.7 FM. We are here with the panel and cast of the Man Cave from Chicago, Illinois. We are so happy to have these guys with us today. When we left, Dr. Nicole had kind of asked you guys to walk us through, how did you get to the point where you knew it was necessary to seek help for just mental health care? Because, you don't necessarily have to have these huge issues going on. It's like anything else. I often like to do the analogy of, if I thought I had a problem with my heart, or if I just thought it was a good idea every year to go check on my heart, right? I think we should approach our mental health in the same way. So how did you guys even get there?
For me, it was.
You want to do it?
Glenn,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, for me, I had gone through, my mom had passed away. So I was a caregiver for my mother for 2 years. And during that time, I'd had a really, really serious breakup as well, of a long-term relationship. And then like a month later, or 2 months later, she passed away. So you're talking about just trauma, like 24 months of trauma from being a caregiver. And then there was a lot before that with her. She had just gotten divorced from my stepfather. So there was that separation.
Mm-hmm.
She's trying to establish her own life, finds out that she has lung cancer. And 24 months of chemotherapy and radiation and treatments and trips to the doctor and things like that. And just really, it really took a toll on me. I was working a corporate job. I left the job. There was just a lot going on with me. And then the relationship kind of slowly deteriorated during that time as well. Bad breakup. And then she passed away. So, and then she passed away 3 days before my birthday. So we talk about compound interest of pain.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what that was. So, after her passing, it turns out that the hospital offered free counseling for as long as you needed it for grief. It was great. I mean, it's a great hospital here in the Chicago area. And you got to see a counselor whenever you wanted for as long as you needed to. So I took advantage of it and started to talk to the counselor just about feelings, and she revealed to me something really interesting, because she said, your mourning really started well before your mother passed away. She was like, you were in mourning probably 2 to 3 years before that.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, now you have to mourn a relationship. You have to mourn her death. Now you have to figure out your own life, because you're not taking care of anybody anymore. You've been invested in a relationship, and you've been invested in being a caregiver. And she's like, the hardest thing for caregivers is finding your own life again and rediscovering who they are. So it was revelatory for me, being able to do that, to talk through it. I learned that writing is amazing therapy for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to write about the journey of being a caregiver, which in turn helped other people. So the indirect result of that is that through my pain, I was able to give some other people support. And never would have thought that would have been the reason for doing it. I was really doing it for myself, but the residual effect of that was amazing. So that's kind of how I got into it. But I would encourage anybody listening now that's going through something traumatic, and it doesn't have to be as traumatic as that. We're all triggered and driven by different things. So your breaking point may be well before mine. Mm-hmm. I tended to be that strong person, and a lot of times the strong people are the ones that need help the most, but we just don't know how to ask for it.
Wow, that's
huge.
That's huge. It is.
Yeah.
You want to weigh in, Robert? I'm
sorry.
sorry.
No, that's all right.
Okay, so for me, similar story, similar situation. I experienced a medical condition that I didn't know about, that happened all of a sudden, that caused me to have 2 surgeries and kind of stopped me. I'm a on-the-go person, and it just stopped me in my tracks, which later led to job restructuring at the company that I loved and had been with for a long time. And it just caused me to say, hey, listen, something's wrong. I got to take a step back and see what's happening. I lost my older sister at the off of a freak accident. So all of those things kind of caused me to say, and to add to that, I had just gotten married and started going through the divorce process after 4 years of being married. And it made me start saying, something's wrong. Who can I talk to about this depression, this experience, these feelings that I'm having? And it caused me to go seek therapy, and just to talk to somebody, just like you do the doctor. You go for an annual physical. We should do the same thing for therapy. So they mentioned I've got 6 therapists. I think it's only 5, but it's important for me to have a variety of people that can breathe into me and tell me essentially what's happening, what things are triggering me, and what things do I need to address. So I'm a firm believer in seeking help from someone to talk to.
Yeah. Mel, you were going to say something.
Well, I grew up in Chicago, and my senior year in high school, I was shot in an attempted carjacking. So, when that happened, I stopped jacking cars. I'm like, man, if they don't shoot back, I need to cool out. No, I'm just kidding.
I wanted to crack that joke, Mel. I wanted to crack that joke. I'm so glad you did, because I thought it would have been in one case. That's what you get for trying to attack people. But okay.
No, seriously, though, I was the Jack E, not the Jack Or. But I was shot in an attempted carjacking, and I think at 17 years of age, and most teenagers have this idea of teenage immortality, as we like to call it. You know, nothing can stop me. I'm invincible. And that really woke me up to the understanding that I wasn't. And to make a long story go away, I did do therapy for some very short sessions. I didn't particularly care for my therapist because of some questioning that he asked me about my aunt, who had nothing to do with my sessions. It was more of a, he was interested type deal. My aunt is she's in the medical industry and well known for her work on psych units of various hospitals. So I stopped going, which was a big mistake, instead of just finding another therapist. So I had a bad taste in my mouth for a very long time about therapy. And it wasn't until some additional issues down the line in my adult life, an extremely bad breakup and all of these other things, where I'm like, man, I need to be open to this idea again. So unfortunately, I waited till there was a major issue instead of sticking with it, but had PTSD for years. The other thing that I'll point out real quick is I think for some people, and my therapist pointed this out to me, we will find things that are therapeutic that aren't what is seen as traditional therapy. So I did a lot of self-work. For those of you that are watching the video, and I know you can't see this on the radio, but I'm in my home office, and my office has tons of books. I've read 80 to 90% of every book that you see here, and you can't even see all of the books that are in the rest of my office. So I do a lot of personal development, professional development, and self-work through reading, through seminars and all of that, which allowed me to cope and deal with the things that I had to press through in life. But there's nothing like that objective person that can listen and help you sort through some things as well.
So you mentioned that, this first incident that you had, that you sought therapy, you were 17 years old. In Dr. Nicole's and our worlds, we talk about trauma and ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, a whole lot, because it's something that's truly overlooked. I mean, when I think back on the things that happened in my childhood that somebody should have said, but it's because of our culture, nobody said.
Yep.
So I grew up with those things and those feelings, right? When you guys think back on your childhood, can you even think back on things that you probably could have benefited from having therapy, and even in your childhood?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can.
I would say, for me, I would say we lighten the seriousness of those early romances and breakups, because they then can lay the groundwork for the way you process and filter every encounter you have that is that way. And so I can honestly say, and I don't think I've even said this to my guys on the show before, and they accuse me of telling the longest stories in all of the since the dawn of man. But I think that I still carry emotional scarring from the relationship I had when I was 22 years old. Because some cuts are so deep. Like I mentioned earlier in my exchange with Nicole, that you learn how to compartmentalize them and navigate them, but you never really learn how to heal them. And so I think I have scars from when I was 22 years old, that had I been brave enough then, and had I, had the insight then, I maybe would have known then, dude, before this gets to be something that you can overcome, you might want to, try to see if you can get some help with it.
Yeah. I think for me, it was death. I had a first cousin that was growing up in the house with me. So we were like siblings, because their parents had passed away when, very young. And, we were just swimming and one drowned. We watched them drag the pond. And I tell this story a lot. And we saw, when he was pulled out of the pond, he looked monstrous, not even like a human being. That was one thing. I was so close to my grandfather. I went to school one morning and I came home one afternoon and he was gone. And I never saw him again. All of those things that typically, particularly in our culture, we don't think about. I'm a musician. I've played at church since I was a little girl. I've played for too many funerals to name, even as a little girl. And I would cry when I saw other people crying. It made me emotional, even when I didn't know the person, right? And I mean, but emotionally, I was so negatively impacted by what I was seeing and what I was feeling. But as a little girl, I didn't know how to express it to anyone, to say, you know, I don't think I'm okay. But we're not talking about women.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we're always talking about women.
Y'all are.
Can I throw a point in here, since we got a little break in the conversation, just for your viewing audience, in case, or listening audience as well, the show is live from the cave, because there's another man cave show, and we don't want them looking for us on the other show. Our show is live from the cave, not the man cave. So
live from the cave. We will get it right. I promise.
Live from the cave. Oh, it's all right, Doc. It's all right. I just wanted to throw that out there, because you know, you go looking for the Fantastic Four.
Yeah, we want them to know. And I try to share, the shows when I get a chance to watch. I try to share, but we will make sure we keep mentioning live from the cave on Indie TV at 9 p.m. Central on Saturdays.
All right, now, bam, that's it. That's it. I think that when you mentioned about traumas and experiences that we have in a childhood time, you know, for me, when I think back to being in 7th or 8th grade, because that's really when the traumas start to happen. And you think about, you know, the girl that broke up with me, you know, when I'm carrying her books home from school, and you're asking yourself why, and never getting a reason behind it. So those kind of things you take into your adult life, and so I sit down with, you know, my counselor Eric to say this. I'm still having these issues, thinking about why, after carrying those, because, you know, back in the day we had the thick books, you know, the English books and science books. They were heavy. If you threw them at somebody, you know, beat them upside the head. You know, so those are kind of the traumas that I'm thinking about in 7th or 8th grade. But again, I'm in therapy today, so I feel much better. So yeah. So I just thought I'd share that with you.
I can Robert, say I got over the 8th grade girlfriend.
Robert brings up a good point. Not just about relationships, though. I think that a lot of people are still making decisions off of something that happened to them when they were somewhere between 5 to 15 years old. So you're living out your life based on an experience that happened in your adolescence or in your childhood, as if that thing really has valid power over you. And I guess it does, because perception is reality, until you decide to let it go or seek therapy or figure out a way to
identify it as something that needs to be healed, and then you have to be brave enough to heal it. And that's not so easy, you know, because sometimes it's easier, Mel, to stay there.
So again, I'm saying this isn't just a relationship thing. It could be a variety of things, right? So
absolutely.
I'll give you a prime example. I remember when I was 6 and my brother was 4, my father bought us bikes, and my younger brother caught his balance on his bike before I did. So as the older brother, I thought, there's something wrong here. I should be first in everything because I was here first. And so that gave me a competitive edge. That wasn't necessarily a bad thing in the business world. I've been extremely successful, but in my relationships with women, once I was first, you know, there was nothing else to accomplish. And I ended up fading out of relationships because it's like, okay, she put me first, psychologically or subconsciously rather, not even knowing this. And so once I agree with what you're saying, Shawn, and some of those things can be an issue, but some of them, depending on what it is, I have no qualms with the fact that my brother rode a bike before me, helped me get to a major income and several degrees and positions at companies and all of that because of the competitive nature of that particular incident. It just kind of depends on what the situation is.
I posted something on Instagram not long ago that says sometimes it's easier to chase your dreams than to catch it. And that sounds like what you're talking about. Your motivation became being the first to get there, not necessarily holding on to what you get, but being the first to get there was where you got your satisfaction.
Yeah,
Depends.
Yeah.
In some
Yeah.
situations.
I think it's good that, everybody has baggage. Everybody brings baggage with them. If you get to the age of 24, you pretty much have some baggage with you. It's how you carry it. It's what you do with it. And how it motivates you and how it drives you. And we talk a lot about that on the show. And one of the things that really gets women up and upset is when we talk about women who basically make the blanket statements about men, but that's their baggage and they're not dealing with whatever happened to them. Maybe they don't like hearing it from 4 or 5 men telling them that, but it's still, the truth is the truth, no matter who's delivering it.
Yeah.
But I think, how you grow up, and to Robert's point, it's not necessarily the girl that broke up with you because you didn't carry their books right, but there's some real things that happened during my teen years that probably I suppressed for a long time and became more of a loner early in my 20s, and it affected relationships, affected all of my personal relationships. And I was very much that person that felt like I didn't need anybody or was driven to be alone and was okay with it, and I had to really work on that because there's sometimes I get like that too. And, even in relationships, what the first thing out of my mouth in an argument was, you can leave because I'll be okay. That was the wrong thing. And let me say, that is very much the wrong thing to say. Anybody listening, that is not the right approach to that argument.
Especially because Glenn isn't very likable. So, I mean.
There's that part. There's definitely that
Well,
part.
yeah. I mean,
to Glenn's point and to Mel's point as well. We say a lot as it relates to these experiences. It's not what's wrong, it's what happened. So when we start, asking that question more about just people in general, right? Then we can better understand folks, when we're not blaming them for where they are, but it's getting the help and it's understanding that you need the help. That's important. I think we're going to shift this conversation to relationships when we come back from break. We'll be right back on 90.
Oh, Jesus.
Ready.
And we're still here on Dr2Dr in the chat room. I am here with my duo, Dr. Nicole West, and we have live from the Man Cave, Mel, Glenn, Shawn, and Robert. We're so happy to have them here with us today. And we want to shift the focus of this conversation to relationships. But before we do, I think you have a very important question to ask these guys, Dr. Nicole.
Yes. So can you all share with us, Rhonda's laughing at me about that. I can't say y'all, I can't say you all. Gentlemen, share with us what you need in a therapist. What do you look for? What are your requirements? What do you need to feel comfortable seeking therapy and really being, Shawn, what did you call it? Emotionally naked with this person? What do you need for that to happen?
For whatever reason, right now, I would prefer a female therapist, only because I think it's easy for men to affirm your position, and go, yeah, you're right, just based on machismo or what you have in common. Because I'm confident enough that if she's giving me something that I can't ride with, I can challenge it and we can peel it back and you can make me find the logic in it. So I kind of want a female therapist, but I also want a therapist who doesn't seem to have male baggage, because I think that's going to filter the way that she would help me and the way that she would advise me. And so as long as they show me a balanced temperament, I'm good. You can't be a self-proclaimed life coach. I want somebody that has been trained and
you want somebody like you, Dr. Nicole. So Dr. Nicole, just to clear it up, I was not laughing at you. Mel kind of virtually slapped my hand. It is live from the cave.
I wondered if he was gonna let you get away with that. I wondered.
No, sir.
I thought the reason.
Yeah.
We're gonna get it right.
Yeah.
That's my answer, Dr. Nicole.
So
you can get some of the other guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
For me, I wanted a good therapist. I wasn't partial to male or female. I think, people can put their personal lives aside when they do their work and they're trained properly And I tried out several different therapists until I found a fit, both male and female, both
That's good.
African American and non. It's kind of one of those things. It's like, for me, therapy was a dating thing. We had our first few sessions, which was courting, and then it's like, are we gonna take this thing to the next level or not? You know, and then it was like, do I really want to be monogamous with you? Do you have what I need? You know, and so yeah, so my therapist now is an African American male, and you know, when you're in the sweet spot, you just kind of know it. Because for me, I don't think that this is a universal thing, but for me, I found a certain comfort in my pain, right? And so as we were going through all of this stuff, even though we were digging up stuff, because by the time I got to therapy, we had years between the incident that happened when I was 17, all of the other life-threatening situations that I had, up to me being robbed at gunpoint again in 2014, to, you know, a major breakup, to losing my son, to all of these things. And I had all of this stuff. But when we found the groove, it's one of those things where you just for me, you just kind of know. And I knew. And we have been working and digging and kicking butt ever since.
So that's going to be a really good way to transition into something that Dr. Nicole brought up earlier today when we were talking about the show. Do you guys even, you know, think about therapy as it relates to relationships? You know, have you ever dated someone and thought, you know, not, you know, people tend to easily think about it, I think, as it relates to a marriage, right? But not so much as I'm dating someone, and this might be a good time for us to go and talk to somebody. You know, maybe you pick up on some things, not necessarily about them, but maybe just about the way you guys, you know, interact with each other that might require some professional.
Yeah, I've done it twice.
Yeah.
2 relationships I've done couples therapy. That was interesting because they both ended. So I don't know if 3 times would be what that means for me. I don't know what that says about me. You know,
you're the only constant. They're the variables. Yeah. You're the only constant, Glenn.
And I have to ask you this: did you recommend it, or did she or they?
No, she did. And the first time, I'm gonna be in so much trouble for this one. I don't know who's gonna listen to this one. But I really
truth comes out
that the person really brought me to therapy to tell me about myself. It wasn't about helping us. It was more of her to get it out, to like, okay, let me give him a tongue lashing. Hey, doctor, you should be on my side. And the doctor's like, no, that's not what I'm here for. This isn't your turn to tell him all about himself and tell him what's wrong with him and why he won't marry you and all of this. He's like, we're talking to both of you about what's going on with both of you. So it wasn't what she thought it was going to be. And that, in either time, I think it wasn't what they thought it would be. And it was pretty revealing, though, about personalities. And you get into therapy, like you go there together and everything's okay. And then
you leave.
It's like the WWE and the bell rang and you're in the cage match and you didn't realize you were in a cage match, so you didn't come prepared. And she came prepared. She brought a chain, a chair, and everything, all kinds of foreign objects to hit you with. And you're just in there by yourself with your trunks. And,
jumping off the rope.
She coming off the top rope, throwing you into the cage and scraping your head. I mean, it's like that when you go sometimes. So it's revealing. It's very revealing.
I didn't know that Glenn and I had such similar situations, because I've only done therapy twice as couples therapy, and both relationships ended. The first one, this is where I learned to value therapy, was when they did it with me. The first session is about one mate and one mate only. The only other person has to listen. And then the second session is about the opposite mate. The other one has to listen. And so I knew after the first session where our disconnect was, and that we weren't ever going to make it. Because in the revelation, I was competing with her grandfather, who had doted over her and her sister from the time they were babies till 17 years old. And I knew, okay, if I never make her feel as adored as her grandfather does, it's not going to happen. So I knew then that this is the writing on the wall right here. And then the other one is so funny because it was a church-based couples counseling, and it was entitled, "But You Don't Hear What I'm Saying." And my ex and I went the first 2 weeks together. By the third week, we were going as single people.
So then therapy worked.
Therapy works.
It
Absolutely.
absolutely works. Yeah, it
It's
absolutely
true. The dirty
Yeah,
secret
I
about
think-
therapy is don't suggest somebody should go to therapy until you're taking care of your own issues.
Right, because Michelle
is-
Obama
that
said
is the key.
she tried to get Barack fixed. That's why she suggested therapy, and she called herself going in to get Barack fixed. And the therapist told her, no, it's not him. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I think that you mentioned some great points about getting people fixed. As I was trying to stay married to my wife, and she indicated some issues that I was having in the communication area, and probably ego got in the way for me. But it made me choose a therapist that, as I went through a number of them, there was a Christian therapist, Bible-based. I found that a Gottman trained therapist worked best for me, so that we could talk about various techniques. But as I learned from going to that therapist, that there were some things that we both needed to talk about, and there was some baggage that we were both bringing to the relationship. That there were no whips and chains or any of those types of things, unfortunately, that some of the other guys got to take advantage of. But it did work out that I did not necessarily have the challenge in the communication area, but maybe there were some things that I could have done differently to maybe soften the blow or use different words to be able to get my former mate to hear me. So, so having that therapy allowed me to look at myself and see what I could do differently. And so when I look at relationships today, it has got to be something that we do where we're going to therapy prior to getting married, again. So
It teaches
I'm all
you
for therapy.
Yeah, it teaches you about your choices.
Yep.
How you date, who you date, and a lot about yourself and your own personal preferences in dating. And it kind of moves the cover and kind of removes that veil that you have in your eyes about that person, because you're like, okay, they got me here for a reason. They had a mission in mind to get me here and get me fixed.
Yep.
And if you're stubborn as me, you're like, well, the hell with that. I'm not gonna fix it. Not
it's
today.
ambush.
That won't happen today. So then your wall goes up. And then
It's that Aries thing, Glenn. It's that Aries.
I know it is. It is. Then the poor therapist is there trying to tear both your walls down.
Yeah.
And you just make more work for them.
Who can
I mean, it's
an
good for them
ambush
because
well?
more money, but
I'm saying, like, if you ambush me, we already have a problem.
You
Right.
got a problem.
So here's the question. You guys mentioned some failed relationships, and we've all got them. But I'm wondering how
I have 100% failure rating at relationships right now. 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what my rating is. I need to look, but
I have
I'm trying to
never
change that.
failed. Yeah, I am not a failure of relationships. I'm just pre-success. I'm in the pre-success stage.
So that's why the book Faith, Failure, Success is behind him.
Is
There
your
you
book
go.
to read?
If you haven't seen it, it's right here. There are things in here regarding relationships, just so you know.
Sorry, Dr.
just thought I'd
Nicole.
share that.
Failure and success.
We're
Fine.
sorry. We apologize. We did not mean to
Fine.
give
That's
you
okay.
a surprise.
Sorry, it was
As
a trigger moment.
As a therapist, I like the reframe. I'm all about it. So thank you for that. But how much of the unsuccessful, not failed, I don't like that word, but the unsuccessful relationships, how many of those are a result of those unresolved issues that we talked about from childhood? How much of that stuff played a role in, those unsuccessful relationships?
Mel would love to answer that question.
He's the voice of reason, so
Boy,
I'll go last.
you ain't no good. You lucky your daddy is my fraternity brother, else I would talk about it right now. So I'll say this. I think to a certain degree or extent, we all carry some things or have some preconceived notions that we might walk into relationships with. For me, at being 44 years of age now, I have grown from every relationship though. Like there are so many things that I have learned from previous relationships. And I say, I'm not starting over, I'm starting with experience. So every relationship has taught me something about myself, about other people, what I want, what I don't want, what I can tolerate. Were there times where I was tripping, where my expectations were too high or unrealistic, or not? So I don't think that I'm personally carrying things from when I was a kid into my relationships. I had some amazing relationships. As a matter of fact, my high school sweetheart from my senior year in high school to, we went through my freshman year of college into my sophomore year, we're still the best of friends today. I call her a prototype. Like she was the prototype. And I look at love through the lens of what that was, but I don't carry it to a degree where it impacts my relationships negatively. Like I'm not expecting anybody to live up to her or anything like that. So I've learned tremendously from my relationships, but I don't think I'm personally carrying anything that is hindering or has made my relationships bad because of that. I can separate, who people are in a relationship.
I think it's hard to consciously do it because oftentimes those unsuccessful relationships show us what we don't want or what we can't deal with or what won't work for us. And they can become things that we become hypersensitive to. The minute we see something that looks like that, we go, oh, I'm not doing that again, and so I think it's difficult. Like I had a long relationship with a mate with an illness, with a health challenge. And I remember a few years later, I was introduced to a lady who was having a health challenge, and she made it clear that she wasn't really compliant with what the doctors wanted. And I never called her again because I'm like, look, I've seen this thing up close when you're doing everything right and you're being adverse to what the doctors are telling you. I'm not getting ready to do that because I got to bear the burden of that. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes I think it's hard the minute something, if it's a bad thing or left us with a bad feeling, when we think that we're seeing that again, we might not want to investigate it to make sure it's what we're seeing. We just go, it's easier to just skedaddle. So sometimes I think it's harder to do that for me. That's just for me.
So can men, or do you guys as men believe that you can love more than one person? Be in love.
I think you can.
I do.
The goal is to discipline yourself so that you're not in that position. But yeah, I think that your heart.
Wait a minute, y'all answered too fast. I didn't even get the question. Wait a minute. Just wait 1 minute.
You said something about love and women, and he just went in. I get it.
So, no. So y'all are just that adamant about it. Absolutely, you can, but the goal is to put yourself in a position where you're not doing it. Is that the answer?
Well, I think the goal
was Shawn's answer. That was Shawn's answer.
Voice of reason.
That was Shawn's answer.
Give me something different, please.
Well, so the first part of the question that we heard is it possible for you to be in love with more than one person? And that answer is yes. So I don't know what the second part of your question is, so I can't answer to the degree or extent that you need me to, because I don't know the rest of your question. I nodded.
My answer anyway, Mel. Whatever.
I nodded on your answer because yes, because I mean, quite frankly, you could have just broken up with somebody and still be in love with them and find somebody else who set your world on fire, right? And that love is that same type of love is present, but you haven't fallen completely out of love with the other person. So in that case, you're in love with two people. Yeah. Or you could be in a situation where you're dating and you find yourself strongly attracted to and in love with a couple of people. You know what I'm saying? It has the ability to happen.
It took me a long time to fall out of love with Sanaa Lathan, and I dated other people and tried, but it took a long time to end that feeling for her. It took a while.
I thought that she was in love with me at the same time.
Yeah.
I was in love with her and Gabrielle Union. So I just, So yes, you can. And
Yeah.
then if you put to, who was the other one? There's probably three
It doesn't
women.
matter. It doesn't matter.
Rhonda,
We're wasting out of time.
before I was so rudely cut off, I just want to say my point.
Nia Long, that was the other one.
You have to move in a way that keeps you from ever finding yourself in that dilemma. So once you're in love and you're committed to that love, then you have to dictate the way you move around so that you don't expose yourself to someone in a way that makes you then start to yearn for them if you're not going to be disciplined enough. I feel like I'm fine with my discipline because people say I'm too picky anyway. So, but some people, that's why I don't like married people that move around like they're single, because then you're going to stumble up on something and then you got to navigate it, and then you're going to blame everybody else for it when you should just act like you was married to begin with.
So on that note, because that note gives me half a hope, we're going to go ahead and move to a close. I have so enjoyed this conversation. I do hope that you guys will come back and have a chat with us, please, because this just was not long enough. Thank you so much for doing this for us. And we will see you guys back here at the same time next Saturday on 94.7 FM. We'll see you then.